Thanks very much for coming. It's great to see so many people here on Saturday afternoon. My name is Matthew Higgs. I'm the director of White Columns. And this afternoon's conversation is the third of a series of 3 conversations on and around the current exhibition, Go to MATTA-CLARK, New York City Graffiti Archive, 1972-73, which has been curated by Roger Gassman of Beyond the Streets in Los Angeles, and Jessamine Fiore of the Go to MATTA-CLARK estate. And we're grateful to both of them for the exhibition. And we're really happy that we were able to bring it to New York and to extend the exhibition by including original works of Go to MATTA-CLARK's, which you can see in the West Gallery. Just to note, the exhibition has been extended to May 17, so that's about another month to run. And we're going to end with a closing event in collaboration with the Whitney Museum. We'll be posting information about that next week. And then there'll be a closing party for the exhibition itself here that same night. If you're here for the opening event, it was the best attended opening in White Columns history, and it was a really amazing evening. Following this afternoon's conversation, there's going to be a book signing with many of the writers whose work appears in Go to MATTA-CLARK's photographs. Please stay around for that. And I think that's all of the introductions for this talk. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to moderate this afternoon's conversation, and she will introduce the participants. And if you can please silence your cell phones, that would be really appreciated. So I'm going to hand over to Claude. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Claudia Gold, otherwise known as Claude. And we are here to talk about 1970s graffiti, the infancy of this global phenomenon, culture that has just really taken the world by storm. And I'm going to start by introducing, this is Henry 161. This is CHARMIN 65. And this is all right, CHARMIN. You should be really proud for laying down the foundation of what is now a thriving female population in graffiti culture. Women were very visible in the early days of graffiti. Did you realize at that time that you were performing feminism?
Not at all. I don't know if I might.
It's on.
Go closer.
Not at all.
So you were just a kid, just doing your thing. Describe to me your introduction to graffiti from somebody who just saw it to somebody who was now participating in writing.
I saw writing on the trains, on the subways, on the inside and the outside. And I wanted to be a part of that. And it intrigued me that the things I had to do to get to that.
Which were?
Climb fences, hide in the tunnels, run from the rats. I'm petrified of rodents. That was something that was really hard for me to get over with. And I never got over it. To this day, I'm afraid of rats.
Well, I think that's a good choice. They're scary. Staff, you also have a very particular, very important part in the legacy of graffiti by starting one of the first super crews, the Ebony Dukes, a crew that had artistic flair and style, which begat many other style crews. What do you think about the state of graffiti culture now, where mentoring is not a top priority like it was in the early days?
First of all, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming and attending this. Well, so the Ebony Dukes started in the spring of 1970. And a lot of people are like, it's part of street gang culture, but it's most of the early members were from street gangs in the South Bronx, including myself. I was a part of the Ghetto Brothers. I was a kid that would draw things, right? I had a natural inclination to sketch things, along with my younger brother Joseph. And so when the spray paint came around, I just naturally started sketching with the spray paint. And as the street gang culture kind of got hotter and hotter in the Fort Apache section of the South Bronx, I kind of more or less gravitated away from that and reorganized as a graffiti crew in that neighborhood.
But the Ebony Dukes the name was taken from.
Okay, so the original Ebony Dukes was a street gang in the 1940s, and a prominent a member of that was a family friend who was a house painter, Bertie. And I used to get jobs with Bertie, house painting, right, as his assistant. And I would listen to the war stories he would tell about the 1940s Ebony Dukes, which was based in Harlem. Basically a semi-organized crime, street gang thing. And so I asked him, I inquired about where the original members were and if it was defunct or is that name still alive. And he more or less said no, a lot of them fell victim to what they were involved with. And so long prison sentences, death sentences, and drugs and other things. So I inquired if I could use that name because I was considering organizing it under graffiti record.
Amazing.
I did that in the spring of 1970.
Wow. And Henry, you have a very distinct role also in the legacy of the graffiti story and it propagating throughout the world. When you were a young person and you were running in the streets and you met Hugo Martinez, who, in my opinion, is the person that really brought graffiti to the masses by forcing the cultural New York City powers that be to look at it with an artistic lens. At the Joffrey Ballet, spawning the New York Times article, talking about this intense beauty and juxtapositions of all things art. Did you know at the time that you were making history that this was something, or were you like CHARMIN where you were sort of just, just a kid having fun?
I was a kid having fun. Right. Good afternoon to everybody. Good evening. No, I started in 1970 with Mike and SJK, who were the ones that taught me how to do graffiti, because I come from the Lower East Side, and I didn't know at that time.
So then why the 161 after your name?
Because that's the street I lived on.
And
So
you went from,
Heights.
I see, so you went from the Lower East Side to Washington.
Yes, I moved from the Lower East Side to the Washington Heights, and that's where I started. But, for the first time in my life as a kid, I ran into the fork in the road where I had to make a decision, and I made the wrong decision. So when I was with Hugo, I was the first one that he came to. And then I sent him, I introduced him to all the writers from the Heights area. And then I sent them up to 186th Street, because that's where Writers Corner is at, But I wasn't allowed up there. 188, sorry. I wasn't allowed up there. Maybe that's why I don't remember. But I was the first one to have a problem with you.
Not the last. No, I love Hugo, but yeah.
I don't like you anymore.
Yeah. All right, Charmin. So, how often did you use the tag Virgin 1? And what was it like to tag with 3 Graces, otherwise known as Barbara, Eva, and Michelle 62?
Well, I didn't tag with those girls.
You never went writing with them?
Never.
Oh.
Never.
I think there was an assumption in
Yeah.
Jack Stewart's book. Interesting.
The question again, I'm sorry. Senior moment.
When you were also had another name, Virgin 1, how often would you use that?
Not too often.
Would you use it in like a different neighborhood? Would you put it up next to each other? Like, were you trying for like a duo?
Sometimes when it came up, when it popped in my head, I would just write Virgin 1. But I remember doing Charmin 65 and Virgin 1 when I tagged the Statue of Liberty.
Right, which is another thing that you're really famous for, is having some of the most iconic spots in those days.
Yeah.
And were you just roaming around the city with a couple of cans and like whatever the day brought, you went with it, or did you have plans of where you were going?
Well, I
To
had a
hit.
mission. I had a mission to go in the store and steal as many markers as I possibly could, steal as many cans of paint as I possibly could, and figure out where I had to hide them, because my parents were, my father was, so that was my main mission, just to steal as much as I could. And I had a little plan. My plan worked. I wrote with 2 of the craziest guys you ever want to meet. It was Ray B 954 and Lionel 168. And Ray B, back in the 70s, everyone had those big giant afros, and they were big, tall guys, and Lionel was like 6'5" when he was 3. And I would send them in the store, and then, of course, all the security store persons, they would watch them. And I would just go take boxes of markers. I never stole one marker. I always took a box.
Pretty privileged. Staff, I'm really a student of the culture, a fan of the culture. While other people were doing letters and names, you started moving into like conceptual pieces. You were the first. I think it's been like attributed to Blade, but what were you thinking about sort of like going against the traditional letter styles when you were approaching that type of stuff?
Just to put the context of what early tagging was. So, like the first generation of signature era, people like Tacky and Mike and 171, SJK 171, basically just a signature tag. A signature tag was enough to get up. That was the motivation to get up, right? And get your tag around as many places as possible throughout the city. So that was the general goal of writers, to be up. And then as time went by, the early 70s, 71, 72, it started to take on a stylistic form, meaning that the signatures started to look more like calligraphy writing, right? That made the writers stand out, individual writers stand out. So it was 2 writers that I kind of admired, Super Cool 223 and Stay High 149. And if you look at my tag, currently it resembles some of the elements of Stay High 149's tag with the double tail and such. But as I said earlier, I was a kid that would draw things, right? And if you wanted something drawn in the neighborhood, people would come to me, and including gang members. I did a lot of colors, gang colors early on. So I drew what I saw, and most of it had to do with what people might consider dark art, skulls and crossbones and stuff like that. But I always wanted to keep my tag legible. In other words, I wanted everybody to be able to read it, not just graffiti writers. Right? I think that was the general goal initially. But as it became oversaturated and competitive, right? I got the idea to draw something on the subway card besides just letters. So in 1973, I drew the Grim Reaper piece, which was the Grim Reaper character, or the Angel of Death on one side of the car, and in the middle I did my name in bubble letters, and the other side I did a graveyard, a hand coming up with a spray can in the tombstone. Right? So that was 1973 I did that. And most people at the writer's bench, right, on 149th Street in Grand Concourse, they looked at it as a black book piece that was on the subway, because the only time that writers was doing stuff like that was in black books, right? Anybody knows what black is? Sketchbooks that writers use to put their signatures in, and other writers' signatures. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Henry, you wrote a book recently that talks about your youth and your life choices, and you said you chose gang life over graffiti life. Do you think one could have existed without the other? After all, gangs sort of invented wall writing with spray paint. I mean, we know people have been writing on walls since the beginning of time. Could graffiti exist without all the gang influence?
Yeah. There was no way you were going to stop this movement. No way you were going to stop the movement of graffiti. You know, it was all over the city. It was spread out more because it was all over the trains, all over the buildings, whereas with gangs, they were in certain neighborhoods. And you were not allowed to go to those neighborhoods with your jacket on, or else you get a beat down. Because to us, taking one of those gang jackets away was like trophy. That was like a trophy. And at first, at least in Washington Heights, gangs didn't hang out with writers. You was either a writer or a gang member, you know. And then, being that we were so close to each other as friends, we decided to just start going around and writing our gang name along with our regular graffiti names.
I see. I know this unstoppable movement, it moved away from gangs. Even though, you know, you can look at the structure of a graffiti crew, it's very similar. Different goals, but it's a similar sort of, you know, unit. How could graffiti have sort of propagated without sort of the influence from the gangs and sort of putting, like, you know what I mean?
No.
Were people, Charmin, were you approached to be in gangs? Was like gang life touching you, or was that just absolutely like
No.
just, oh hell no, okay.
No. I could fight too good. They couldn't make me be a gang.
So what else, Charmin, what else were you doing when you weren't writing graffiti? What were you doing as like a young teenage girl, you know, coming into your adultness in 1972?
I boxed.
You boxed.
My dad made us box.
Okay, and what were you listening to?
Oh, any and everything. I listened to all sorts of music. My mother was a classic pianist, so I listened to that as well. I listened to classical music. I love rock. I love soul. I can't think of any music that I don't like. So, yeah, I boxed when I was a kid. My father made my mother cry. She said, "You're gonna turn my girls into a bunch of lesbos." So, hope I didn't offend with that term. That was what she said.
Staff, what do you see graffiti, also sort of you dipping, you know, your foot into the gang life? Do you feel that graffiti is a gateway drug to harder crimes?
It could be, but not necessarily have to be. The neighborhood that I inherited, I was in foster care about 5 years in Staten Island. The first 5 years of my, well, the second 5 years. I went in foster care when I was 5 years old, and by 10 years old, I was returned to my mother, who was living in the Fort Apache section of the South Bronx. Now, the Fort Apache section of the South Bronx was a totally different culture, environment, experience than what I was living when I was in Staten Island. And one of the major things that I noticed in the Fort Apache section of the South Bronx was a lot of writing on walls. Now, and that's necessarily, I'm not necessarily referring to like tagging writing. General like political writing, just local writing about different things in the neighborhood, and a lot of writings from street gangs. Street gangs marked their turf. That was one of the things that kind of attracted me to the Ebony Dukes, because they had tags in Harlem before spray paint. Spray paint was invented in 1949, and the Ebony Dukes of Harlem had like brush paint tags marking their turf. Gangs mark their turf to warn you that if you come in here, you know, you in our area, and if you're not right, you can suffer the consequences. So I was exposed to that early on, and that was one of the motivating factors of me tagging. But the gangs, a lot of the gangs would act like, including my gang, the Ghetto Bugs would act like they didn't like graffiti, right? And which in a way they did, because they were more or less community activists, and they were basically trying to clean up the neighborhood, right? But they had tags of the Ghetto Brothers. You had to see the Savage Skulls and Black Spades and the turbans and the javelins and the Roman kings and on and on and on and on, right? So, yeah, I saw a lot of gang tags. I saw a lot of political tags, because you have to understand the era that we're in. A lot of things was happening. The Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, the hippie movement, and people would do their protests and writings on walls. And all of that attracted me.
Same. Henry, at that time, besides writing graffiti, what were you doing? What were you wearing? And what were you listening to?
Well, after I had that situation with Hugo, like I said, I was the first one to come into the club, and I was the first one to leave the club. Because I like gangs, I like violence. And as far as music, I listened to all kinds of music, but I was mostly more interested in rock and roll, the hard rock. Only because I used to drop a lot of acid, smoke a lot of pot. And, you know, those rock and roll bands, they were really Led Zeppelin.
Right, Stairway to Heaven came out in 1972. Right.
You know, so I used to go to a lot of concerts, because at that time you could get in with $7, you know. And it was a little rough on me, you know, like if I would have stayed with the graffiti, I think my life would have been a lot better. I think, you know, I would have been more successful. But I chose to go down the other way. You know, like I said, there's a fork in the road. I didn't take the time out to weigh out the consequences of one way and the rewards of the other way. So I chose the one with the consequences, the guns, the knives, the drugs. And I decided to leave graffiti altogether. And I come from how would you say, a semi-abusive family. So I hit the streets at 12 years old. My father, I don't know if you want me to go this deep,
Go.
you know.
No, I want to know.
Well, my father he found out where we were living because we left him from the Lower East Side. We was living on the Lower East Side, and we moved uptown. So the super building helped my mother find the apartment. But in reality, I think he was trying to get at her, you know, because he became my stepdad. So my dad found out, and he tried to come at us, you know, to hurt us. And he took the super, and he cut him up, like really bad. And I took the blade. Me and my brother jumped on my father, and I had the blade, and I was ready to cut him. And my mom stopped, yelled at me, and I let it go. They arrested my father. I went to the hospital to see my mother's boyfriend at the time. He wasn't still my stepdad. Well, I didn't look at it that way, but he told me, you got two fathers, you know, and in spite of what your father has done, you still got to love him because he made you. You know, I mean, excuse me, I got that wrong. You got to respect him. You don't have to love him, but you got to respect him because he gave you your life. And then you got me. I'm the one that's going to teach you how to work and earn money.
So what did your parents think when you were running around at night and painting graffiti, coming home dirty, coming home with, you know, drugs, money, whatever it was? What did your parents say?
Okay, now, we used to have a thing back in the days called hooky parties. And that meant that a lot of us would just not go to school and go to somebody's house and we would party, dance, make out. We were all teenagers. So one day I had one in my house, and Junior 161, may you rest in peace, my brother. He was in the bathroom with a female, and I don't know what they were doing, but the sink came down, and the pipes broke. And being that my stepdad was the super of the building, he called my mom at work. And when she got home, the house was full of people and beer bottles and, you know, smoke from all the weed. So she started kicking everybody out. So when she went to kick me, out, I put my hands on her. And then from 12 years old, I never looked back. You know, I slept in basements, and I had to eat the bread when they hang it on the front of the gate, but they don't do it no more. And I used to have my girlfriend, who used to write first Chino 186, who was with Joe 182. And then I came along, and, you know, I snatched her from Joe 182. But I used to stay in the basements where we hung out, and she would bring me chocolate in the morning, and I would take the bread and eat that. And it was rough coming up. And I used to tag the gang name, but I also was tagging my name. But then I dropped my name, and I just stuck to doing the gang, which was named the Young Galaxies. And I went from being the vice president to being the president of the gang.
And what did the gang do? The gang was an organized crime organization. What was the purpose of the gang?
To hurt people and rob jackets You know, so a lot of times we would snatch purses so we can eat. Because back then the Chinese restaurants would give you a bucket of rice for like $2 or $3. You had 5, 6 people that can eat. We used to get on the trains and just go around slapping people. And I'm sorry for this. I paid a heavy price for it. But we would just we would go in stolen cars and drive around and steal other gangs' jackets. Until one day we took one from a Hell's Angels, which was a big mistake. Because they came for their jackets, and we were kids, and these guys were like so big and hairy, and they had these loud motorcycles, like we went downstairs and got the jacket real quick and gave it back, you know. And then another time, we had a fight on 163rd with a gang called the Saints, and in that situation, we had people on the roof. We had some of the kids on the roof with MATTA-CLARK, you know, those gasoline with bottles. We had people along the streets because there was basements, you know, entrances to the basements, you know, as you go down the street. So from Broadway to Amsterdam on 163rd, that was our spot, you know, our main spot. And when we were settled, we knew they were coming for us. Now, the Saints used to be a lot older than us. And so when they came down the block, the guys on the roofs started throwing the cocktail bombs at them. And as they were driving by, the guys from the basement were coming out and shooting at them. And then when they made a left turn on Broadway to go back down, the car got on fire, and we ran and we hit them all. And I don't mean hit them with my hands. And then we ran away and went to our basement, you know, our clubhouse.
And how did you feel? Did you feel good? You were happy?
Yeah, I felt good. I did. I really did. I used to enjoy hurting people. I did.
I think there's, you know, there's a part, you know, of animal in all of us. And, you know, you have to work really hard to quell it. And
it's a deep wound.
Yeah, well, you are
And
hurt, people hurt.
It's taken a long time to heal.
Right. Charmin, what would you say is your greatest achievement in your life looking back? And does it include graffiti, or was that just something you did when you were a kid?
The greatest achievement in my life.
Just looking back on your life, like graffiti related or not, like.
Okay. Was having my children.
Amen.
That was the best thing I could ever do. The greatest accomplishment in life was having those children. And then another great thing was getting up. That's what we called it back then. We weren't graffiti artists. We were writers.
So what made you stop writing graffiti?
I got older and became interested in boys.
Right, life choices. Right, things change. And so, if you were going to say there was a concentrated time, was it 3 years, was it 5 years, was it 10 years? How long were you writing graffiti before you sort of like hung it up?
I can say I stopped in 75. In 1975, I stopped.
Also, she has the, you know, distinct honor of being the first woman ever to do a piece on subway trains ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First female United Graffiti artist.
Yes, UJ.
But I gotta give credit to this guy, because I saw the things that he did when we were in UGA, and I loved what he did. I am not an artist. I can do a little something here and there, but nothing like him, nothing like him. Not him, none of them. But I tried, they inspired me to do better. And that's what I enjoyed about being with the guys. And they also made me feel like I was one of the guys. Because you know how guys are, they see a girl and want to, tap their ass. But these guys just I wrote. And I never said, oh, can you help me? Can you put my name on the train? Can you put my name on the wall? I did it myself. And it was because of these guys that I did that.
Amazing. Let's hear it for the guys. When did you guys all meet each other?
Sometimes it would be 149th Street, Grand Concourse.
Or when was the first time you ever met Henry or staff?
Oh, at UGA. UGA. Yeah.
United Graffiti Artists, by the way. You don't know.
I met COCO there. I used to always admire his run. I said, who's this COCO 144? He's all over. And I finally had the opportunity to meet him. And I love COCO.
I love you too.
Yeah, man. He was always so cool and so smart, even as kids. I was like, where did they get this guy from? He's so cool. Because we were wild and crazy, and he was just always even keeled. So it kind of, I'm a little baffled by how could you do that on the subway and still be so cool?
How are we on time, Roger? We have 10 minutes. Okay, great.
So can I ask him a question?
Yes, please.
What did you wear back in the 70s? Because we had that thing about clothes.
Well, okay, so, sometimes,
You're scooping me.
sometimes, because I was in the street gang, Ghetto Brothers, outlaw, gear, which is basically a lot of denim, cut sleeves, floppy hats, and such like that.
What shoes? What shoes?
And, MC boots,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Stompers.
Yeah, Jolly Stompers too, little Apples,
Yeah.
right? But we also had the fly team too, which you tried to emanate. But you had to have money, you had to be some kind of a hustler, either drugs or pimp or something like that. That was in the neighborhood. Pimps and hustlers were characters that were gang members, were people that were admired in certain neighborhoods. And sometimes you just couldn't escape them, right? They would come at you and they would ask you what your affiliation was, and if you wasn't affiliated, you would become a victim, right? So I just happened to associate with a good one, which was the Ghetto Brothers, for me, right? But, yeah, so stylistic things, right? Back in the early 70s, a lot of the youth, especially in the African American community and the Latino community, had a certain style about them. I knew that Puerto Ricans liked to drive Chevys, right? And such like that. And they had a certain style that they would wear. And you had African Americans would have certain styles. Pepper silk and blondettes and
Playboys.
Playboys. And stuff like that. So yeah, it was this thing called style. You had to be able to represent who you was and your style. That's how you was identified in your style. And it soon crossed over into the graffiti writing. So we got one of the style masters here, Riff 170, right? Who was, So I wasn't so much into bending the letters. It's nothing that I couldn't do. Is that I just wanted my letters legible. I wanted to decorate the letters themselves and the circumference of the letters. That was my thing. Yeah. So as for Charmin, right? So all of us from that early period are baby boomers. So if somebody tells you that they're a pioneer and they're only 40 years old, right? or they're not collecting Social Security, that's right. You don't have to collect it, but you have to be eligible for Social Security. Right? Absolutely. Right? The thing I admired about Charmin, right? You gotta understand that most of the men back then were male chauvinists. That's just the generation we was. Women had their place, and you didn't do what men did. And I was shocked to see Charmin doing her thing. She lived like 2 train stations from me, right? So basically in the same neighborhood, Fort Apache. She was Fort Apache too, right? And the thing about Charmin, she was the most outrageous kleptomaniac that I ever met. Incredible. The way that we call it racket, right? And if you was a writer in the early 70s, you had to be a good rapper. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you didn't rack your pen, you was illegitimate. You had to rack your pen.
No.
What's that?
I'm going to disagree.
Okay, then disagree.
Our friend, Phase 2, did not steal. He did not steal. He would come with us downtown. We would go into Pearl Paint, and he would sit out there and wait for us. And Lionel, 168, you know him, Lionel was tight. And Lionel would always steal for him and Lonnie.
That's the way to do it. Henry, did you feel like also that you wanted to leave graffiti as a teenager because the penalties were much different, right, when you were under 17? Was that also one of the reasons that perhaps maybe you chose the other road?
Well, what happened was at 14 years old, we were already having the gangs, and we had the Levi jackets with fur collars and the things in the back, like the motorcycle drivers. But we had our first gang fight, and everybody, we got together and we had a couple weapons, and I went and I grabbed a big old knife, and with no intentions of doing anything to anybody. But I wound up killing a young innocent person at 14. So at that point in Washington Heights, the gangs kind of laid their jackets down, and it became a whole different lifestyle. The gangs were still there, but the jackets were gone. And after probably about another year, I just kept going with the gangs, and as soon as I hit 16, I decided to join the Marine Corps just to get out of that lifestyle. But that didn't work either, because I became a criminal in there, and I had an organization helping me do things. So I had to leave that. Well, you know what? I'm here. I've been through a lot, and there's a lot in the book.
So
But
what
I'm
would you
here.
say is your greatest achievement in your life, looking back on your life, that you have a lot of regret, you did a lot of things that you wished you hadn't, you had been put in a position of violence as a child and grew up like that. Now looking back at your life, what is the granular nugget of positivity that you can say that you were proud of?
Well, I came out after a 25-year prison sentence with the federal system. I've been through the city system, state system, and I wound up in the federal system. And when I came out, I decided to live in San Francisco. I got a job as a case manager working with troubled youth. And I was advocating for them in the courtrooms, at schools, at home, because some of them, they didn't get along too much with the parents. But we had an after-school program, you know, and I used to go around with the kids. We used to, you know, we did outreach work at night. We would take them to ball games. We would take them to the movies. We'd feed the homeless. We would go around giving hats and gloves to the homeless. That brought a lot of joy. I really enjoyed it because I see a smile on people's face, and that would put a smile on my face. And I loved it so much that I took my ex-girlfriend's kids, who were probably like 5, 6 years old, and I used to make a bunch of rice, and they would help me make the salad, and I would take them to go and feed the homeless with me. And I used to let them bring the food to them, and I just serve it. And we did gun buybacks. We done street cleaning. We would have the kids come and clean the streets in San Francisco, and we would bring the parents involved. We would get the parents involved and have them barbecue. Because when we come home from work, we want our food. And if it could be cooked and prepared already, even better. Some of us have that, some of us don't, because of the way things are now. But we felt that those kids are working. And when they finish working, they work 4 hours. But when you got a 16, 17-year-old kid working 4 hours, cleaning the street, that they don't want to do, but they do, and they come back, they're hungry. So we used to make the parents cook, because that ain't my son, that ain't my daughter. I don't need to cook for them, you know. So that's how we would try to bring the families together. And but
So you did a total 360, and you're in.
Totally.
You should be.
Totally. I just finished talking to the president of Boricua College, and are you ready?
He's ready for a question.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, so that's great, you know, and that's ultimately what the whole culture is about. You know, most of us come from disenfranchised environments, and you know, dysfunctional families and stuff. And definitely me. Charmin came from a good home, though.
Yeah.
yeah. But a lot of us did come from this, and graffiti writing was like our therapy. It helped us to do things and to be recognized and to have that peace, love, and unity with people. But just to understand that hardcore grassroots graffiti writing is part of the outlaw culture. It's not legal, right? If you get caught, there's consequences, right? So it's part of the outlaw culture, right? Whether you want to believe it or not. It didn't become part of the art scene till way later on, right? I didn't intend for it to be part of the art scene when I was drawing, right? I just was doing, you know, my writing the way I did it, right? And when it was drawing, I just was part of my skill. But overall, what you see here is the foundation of it. This is about as early as you can get with the whole culture and the use of spray paint to write and draw with. It's all right here. And, you know, you have people that say it was all about art. No. Because you have two people here that listen, I wasn't an artist, I wasn't drawing things, I was getting up. And getting up is a big thing, especially in big cities, urban environments, right? You become kings and queens. So you're looking at kings and queens here, right? Peace.
Anyway, thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for being on the panel, for jump-starting this culture that we love and revere so much. We owe so much to you.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Three. You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, because I really wanted to get into the fashion of.
Tell us.
Yeah, man. I mean,
Talk
I was
from
a
the mic.
fashionista. when I was a kid. I mean, I always wanted to have the latest style, and that included me wearing a mini skirt when I went tagging. I mean, I'd be in the tunnel, or mainly the layup tracks, and we'd be on there just writing and spraying and doing
Those
what
rats?
we needed to do. And when the cops would come, all of us would haul ass. But I was smart. I jumped up on the platform, tucked my legs, I can't do that anymore, tuck my feet up under my backside with a mini skirt on. The cops would stop, look, see a mini skirt, and keep running after the guys. But I was still fly. I looked good.
You still got up.
I still got up. Looking good and getting up. Damn.
Is that gonna be the title of your book? Great. Thank you, everyone.